Derivatives trading involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results.
So stressful when the world's on fire. Good God. I can't look at this, guys. Like, my strategy is you buy it and you hope that you got a good spot. Yeah, but we all think you're crazy. You don't fight this. No way. The markets are freaking out and you don't think that anything is wrong? Come back tomorrow and I'll lose it all. Should be fun.
Good morning, everybody. Well, we got Federal Reserve this week, and I think it could turn out to be an interesting week here. So the big headline I'm getting this morning is that Nick Timiraos has another story out at the Wall Street Journal suggesting that consumers just have a lot of cash and then it'll be very difficult to fight inflation. So I think, at least on the speculative side, some of this upside action that we've seen in the treasuries lately may come back today, but we'll see where they go. Let's come over to the charts. Here in the 10-year, you can see we are a little bit lower, and man, I didn't realize we came back quite big, but I'd have to say, just really from the Bank of Canada on, it's just been like crazy volatile, like big up move. These swings were really wide. I'm a little concerned that we might have some more of that volatility in store for us this week. And if it is, I mean, because we're talking about like 50 to 100, 5 to 10 basis point swings. So that's a little dangerous for us with small accounts. Over here on the S&P 500, really good rally going into the end of the week, though. Oil coming down here. Natural gas on the rise. Gold and silver still kind of hanging out after those big drops a little late last week. And Kappa on the move down. Yeah, so what about the dollar? Dollar is going to be the interesting one to me. Looks like the dollar... Well, the dollar is quite off of its highs. It's in a small uptrend here. And the Bitcoin's hanging out closer to the higher end of their range. Bitcoin's been holding really well. So that's where we're at. And again, so these flows that we've been seeing this week, last week, that were pushing us up in the equity indexes, likely to persist. All right. So my bias, at least in equities, is still long. I don't know about the treasuries. I'm not 100% sure about the treasuries. I'm worried that we might get a lot of short hedging flows. But it may just turn quiet until the FOMC. I don't know. We'll see. So that's basically where we're at. I'm like way behind today. I mean, I started the stream on time, but I got food. So we do get OPEC World Oil Outlook report at the bottom of the hour. And today is US Chicago PMI. I've never seen Chicago PMI on a Monday. But do remember that particular news item comes out earlier to subscribers. I forget who it is that puts that out. But there, institutions can pay to get it early, so you want to keep an eye on that one a little bit early. People always get caught by that one. Yeah, last thing I see from Nick was talking about how the Fed is running at an operating loss. Larry Summers Bono out with a new book. I can't comment intelligently about his music, but I know this. He is a shrewd policy advocate and policy operator. Because of him, hundreds of thousands of lives have been saved by debt relief and foreign aid for poor countries. Is he being sarcastic or? Okay. I did see something really interesting from Bono that he basically said, oh, you know what? I was like really wrong about a lot of things, especially like socialism and stuff, and that the best thing to help these countries is to bring in industry and like stop giving them free stuff, because that prevents them from building up their own businesses. Kind of interesting. Let's see here. Oh, I got some comments from Jigsaw here. I don't think that they still haven't released their new version, have they? Oh, maybe 4.0.01 beta? Wait, isn't that what I'm on? Yeah. I don't know. Hopefully it's soon, because there are some features in there that I really want. I really want to show you guys. Oh yeah, their newest one is on 4.0.02, so. Okay, I'm gonna eat a little bit here now. Have you tried Metastock? Yes, I have. I did. So here's my thoughts. First of all, Refinitiv Icon isn't very good. when I say isn't very good, it's not that they don't have good information and everything, but like the platform, the technology that they're using for it is kind of crap. It's basically a web browser. But you get some interesting data from it, and I was able to watch cash treasury data from TradeWeb with them, and there was some use to it. Like, I could come in here and I could see what the treasuries were doing and watch TradeWeb, and you kind of got a better idea of what you should be putting up here. Oh, by the way, I'm just now realizing today, last day for the micro treasury yield futures. So that's something important to keep in mind. I was just thinking, like, there's absolutely no liquidity in the 5-year at all. They probably are putting it up on the new month. But yeah, like when these spreads are really big, it did kind of give you some information about where you could put your orders, but there is a basis difference because they're a future. So if you looked today, the numbers should be pretty close to dead on, but then tomorrow they'll be like 2 basis points difference. So but they got a cool setup they got going right now where you can get like 2 months trial or something like that. Well, when you start, you get 2 months for a discount and stuff. So I did that, but ultimately I determined that I wasn't using the data enough to justify paying for it. If you were doing equities, it would probably be a lot more valuable. You just got the book? Good deal. Every time that somebody says that, I'm like, I don't know if that's good or bad. I think ultimately it's a good thing for the world. It's a good thing for the world for more people to know about this stuff. So, plus it's a hard book. I gotta tell you, I could go out and I could go on like, you know, some public television where like I had everybody's eye and I was like, go and read this book. And I bet you tons of people would like go out and get it and like not read it. So it's tough math, right? But especially you guys that you've been involved in the market for a while, I think that a lot of times at first you're gonna be like, okay, but like as you get closer to the end, you're gonna be like, oh my, of course, oh, like it'll blow your mind that retail traders aren't talking about this stuff, right? So we're listening to the synthwave channel today. I feel like it's a little bit more appropriate to the stream. What do you think? It's not. It's a little bit more like serious of a vibe. A little bit of an 80s vibe to it too, which I like. Good morning, Mayor Morgan. Well, the treasuries are pushing down, which is kind of like what we were concerned about. I would say it's pretty light volume, slow grinder. We're about halfway down to the bottom, but I don't know. It could turn into a snowball, you know? It was particularly hard in the 30-year too, by the way. So you better keep an eye on that. Do you ever read Quant Stack Exchange? Not regularly. I suppose it might be a beneficial thing to do, but I don't have that much time. I feel like whenever I get into quant stuff, it really is like spend an afternoon trying to understand certain thing. You know what? That reminds me, I got to write down on my list here. There was a quant thing that I wanted to look into about, like, you know, volatility is mostly path dependent. It looked like I should be able to program that into a NinjaTrader. What's this? Biden lost his temper on a call with Zelensky when Ukraine's leader asked for more aid. I bet. Well, not I bet, but I bet that Joe Biden is seriously stressed about it. Okay, we got a tweet storm here by Larry H. Summers. I'm going to read it all, okay? The United States right now faces as complex a set of macroeconomic challenges as at any time in 75 years. Read my column just posted on the Washington Post. Curbing inflation comes first, but we can't stop there. This is not the same thing as saying it faces the darkest economic moment. Our current situation includes strengths such as low unemployment and is by no measure as grave as the 2009 financial crisis or 1970s inflation. What stands out, however, is the number of serious interconnected problems demanding attention. Consider the links in the chain of macroeconomic challenges. First, an economy that even progressives such as Paul Krugman recognize as overheated is operating with a core inflation rate that is close to 7% and is not yet declining. Second, there's now a consensus prediction of recession in 2023, the most recent Federal Reserve projection suggesting that inflation can be brought down to 2% without unemployment rising above 4.4% is simply not plausible as a forecast. Third, the Fed has raised IR in a way markets would have thought unlikely in the extreme only a year ago. Markets are reeling from the shock, with a possibly normal trading could break down in the Treasury bond market, an event, if unchecked, would have significant ramifications. Fourth, the global economy is everywhere challenged by rising U.S. interest rates and a dollar exchange rate at record levels against key currencies. The fallout from the war in Ukraine has also been devastating to many economies. And all this while, we are still finding our way on COVID-19 cases, which are likely to rise this winter. An estimated million-plus workers have been pulled out of work by long COVID, and COVID effects appear to be slowing U.S. productivity growth. Each of these issues could be all-consuming in normal times. How should policymakers respond to the combination of all of them? The objective of policy should be clear, at least. What is most important is that the maximum number of Americans who want to work are able to work at as high an income as possible now and in the future. Other matters, from the level of government debt to the functioning of financial markets to business incentives to inflation, are not important for their own sakes, but because of their effects over time and employment on income. It is vital for the Federal Reserve to not waver. Chair Powell has vowed to impose sufficiently restrictive monetary policy to return inflation to within the range of a 2% target. The more confident workers, businesses, and markets are, the Fed will follow through, the less painful the process. So I saw this thing here on LinkedIn. One of the traders that I follow on from the Netherlands, and he's saying, like, central banks are crushing the economy, showing that out in the strip malls, still plenty of people out and about. And this just goes back to what Nick Timmeros was saying, which is that consumers still have a lot of cash and are spending it, apparently. So this might make it very difficult for the Federal Reserve to bring inflation back down. Carl Quintilla here, quoting the Bank of America desk. Our model CTA covered equity positions in the SPX and RTY. Our model could reinitiate a short should the S&P 500 and Russell 2000 pull back from recent levels. The reinitiated position would be smaller in size, however, as the trend in both is now less negative. Mm. Oh man, all my Republican friends are obsessed with the Paul Pelosi attack story this morning. Because over the weekend they did try and turn it into. So it turns out, remember we were all concerned on Friday. Turns out that it was just a crazy guy that lives in San Francisco, and thus not really a Republican. But the Democrats still tried to twist it into this is because of Republican extremism. Meanwhile, Republicans are passing like conspiracy theories about it now. So it's just like a big, huge mess. But I think that, you know, like I see that's what Ben Shapiro is tweeting about right now. I feel like it's a distraction. Oh, are you talking about the deep dive that Elon Musk posted? A friend of, yeah. So I think though so my own personal explanation for this is, I think a lot more likely though. No, the one I did myself. Oh, I don't see, where did you post it? I didn't see the link. Is it not letting moderators post links now too? So one of the weird things that happened was when he called the police, he knew the guy's name and he said that he was a friend and things like this. So what I think is really going on here is, you know, of course, Paul is going to be left leaning and they're pretty radically left leaning, to be honest with you. And so I think that they're stuck on this whole, you know, when police come, they hurt people, etc., you know, all cops are bastards sort of thing. So I think that when he called in and he said that, he was saying that so that when the police came, they wouldn't assault the guy, essentially. Right? He was worried that the guy would be hurt by the police. I think that that's what was going on. So the Republicans are saying, oh, it's because he brought a prostitute home or something. I don't think so. Just because the guy is so crazy. The guy is so crazy. I would think that if you were like out at a bar, not that I've ever done this sort of thing, so I don't know how they go about it, but I would think that you would know within 5 minutes of talking to this guy that he's crazy and that you don't want to bring him to your house. So I think the Republican conspiracy theory about this, I don't even want to call it a Republican conspiracy theory. I'm just going to call it the far right conspiracy theory about this is probably wrong. Right? He has a history of it. Yeah, the thing that stands out to me is that the police are walking back their original press conference. You only do that for political narrative control. Totally. But if one of the things that I hope we've learned over the last 8 years or so whatever of Democrats doing this sort of a thing is that it doesn't take very much for them to want to go into narrative control mode, you know? I'm just saying, it doesn't take much, right? Just the fact that it was an assault that involved Pelosi could be enough for them to come in and start saying, you got to be careful what you say about this and this, because we don't want people to think this, and right? Just everybody coming in and making conspiracy theories could make them start to be weird about what information they give out and how they give it out, even if there's nothing nefarious. Right. But really, but just consider my main theory here, right? Just consider my main theory. Paul Pelosi, because I think that was the thing that really triggered people to come up with these conspiracy theories, right? Paul Pelosi was concerned about the police hurting him. That's what I think really happened. Yeah, but to the bigger point, because you can see, Like, you see how big of a distraction it is, though, right? Like, I brought it up. Y'all started talking about it. Everybody, all you main what Uzi, Tom, Morgan. I haven't heard from Zach, but y'all had to make a comment about it, right? I mean, it's a weird story. It's a weird story. And it's totally cool for us to talk about it. It's totally cool, right? But for like Republicans in politics and like the political operative types, yeah, it looks like that they're set to just focus entirely on that today. And I think it's a distraction. I think it's a distraction. I think that what's been helping you guys, what's been helping the Republicans has been the current state of the economy. And that's where they should be focused. We got a Federal Reserve meeting this week. What do you think? Let's make a poll about the Federal Reserve, shall we? Ooh, the button for polling has changed. I can start a Q&A. Well, maybe we'll try that later. FOMC. I sell. I think that equities and treasuries fates are probably the same here off of FOMC, so I'm just going to say buy or sell. All right. People tend to zoom in on the story and the damage it can do, but the thing that always has interested me is the narrative control. Watching all these little bits and pieces jiggle, shuffle, and move to get the messaging right. Yeah. Well, so the thing that I find weird is why are Democrats so overly concerned about controlling the narrative? I don't remember them being like this when I was a kid. You know? Like, when I was a kid, like high school, right? I feel like the camera's a little bit too far. When I was in high school, I remember it was like the Iraq War, and the Democrats were the ones that were against going to war in foreign countries. The Democrats were the ones that were concerned about infringing on your privacy. They were ones that were concerned about government overreach because of the Patriot Act. They were the ones that were concerned about free speech. And the Republicans have always had this thing since Rush Limbaugh, really, about how the media tries to influence things, which really started to come to the front after towards the end of George Bush, when they were trying to do the immigration bill. That's when when Republicans really started to get on that. And then, it just kind of got worse and worse. Like, after John McCain lost, it was like obvious to everybody because the Republicans didn't really like him, right? But it was like they saw how John McCain went from like loved by the media to like the absolute devil, and then back to being loved by the media. It was like so obvious at that point that there was a liberal bias out there, right? And then by the time Obama came along, like the Republicans were 100% like in on that, right? And then in the second half of Obama's time, it was like everything flipped. All of a sudden, the Democrats were the ones that were concerned about safety. They were in favor of any kind of government policy that was going to make people safer or anything like that. It was just like it flipped around so hard. It's so weird. And then all of a sudden, free speech didn't matter anymore. And it wasn't just free speech. It's like active attempts to control narratives, and it's even like overtly blatant now at times. Like I've seen many instances where the Democrats were essentially knowingly putting out a false story, like or knowingly suppressing a story. because they were concerned that it would hurt a minority or something of that nature, right? It's just kind of like, now there's a tangential issue, which is when people bring up stats to say racist things. That's a different thing. Like, statistics aren't racist, but there are certain statistics that you can see out there that people only bring them up so that they can use them as evidence for logistical fallacies about issues of race that are based largely on a misunderstanding of statistics. Okay. So every time I see that, I'm like, yeah, okay, like, we should put a stop to that, because it's not that like the fact is racist, is that I know where you're going next. I know where you're going next, right? That one I'm with them on, but the rest of it, it's like, what the heck? They get so triggered by it sometimes, and it's just so bizarre. I can't explain how they got to that point, because that was not the left when I was a kid. When I was a kid, the thing that bothered me about the left was how boisterous and offensive they were, and that's completely switched. It makes no sense, and I can't completely explain the switch. Culture is broken for all of us, and it impacts different racial demographics differently. I just can't explain the difference. I mean, I think that what changed was that big tech took over the left, because the left was, behind those largest innovations, and it just came down to that all of those things were beneficial for big tech, right? That incentives end up predicting what people will do better than ideology. But I don't think that explains the narrative control part, Look at the sudden rapid onset of trans kids units. Well, I don't know if you can prove that, because if we were looking at it from a national level, we would probably only notice that. But I think that you have an interesting theory, because I think your theory is that if kids are doing it largely for attention, which is not something that we have a whole lot of evidence to back yet, but I do think is a valid theory. Okay. That people that don't have some sort of already existing defining characteristic to be oppressed by would be more likely to develop one. Yeah. One of my kids has been, he's not trans or anything like that, but he's been involved in that stuff, or like his friends are, essentially. So I've been reading quite a bit about it, and you know me, I'm all about research, right? But the research on this particular issue is very, very poor quality. Very poor quality. Oh, it's kind of bothersome. So there's been a couple of studies where they've made these big conclusions where they're saying, oh yeah, it's really good for people to get the surgery, and it leads to better health outcomes and all of these sorts of things. The studies that they were making those conclusions off of were web surveys. They were self-identified web surveys. Like, they went to all the trans communities and they had people go and fill the survey out. That's where they got that information from. So not valid scientific data, right? But then all of these people are turning around and making it out like that it's scientific, and I don't believe that it is. And I see some of these kids that they're identifying as like trans or pansexual or whatever the deal is, but like all of their relationships are heterosexual. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, and so my leading theory is I gotta be really careful, because I don't want this to turn into like trans hate or anything, any kind of accusations like that. I'm trying to be scientific about it, but my own theory is that, yeah, maybe some kids are doing it for attention. Do you have statistics showing that it is more prevalent among upper and middle high earning white families? By the way, I didn't understand what you were saying earlier about links. That blog, when I did myself, I don't see, you never posted a link. But do you have data to suggest that it's more common? But I digress. That wasn't the point. I probably got too deep into that particular subject. I guess because it's kind of something that I've been dealing with. But yeah, is the shift on the left? I guess what you're kind of suggesting, though, Uzi, is that this particular shift on the left towards narrative control is being driven largely by wokeness, is what I think you're saying, right? Yeah, you can turn data into whatever you want with contextualization. I mean, you saw you're pulling this from a study somewhere, yeah. Okay, I'll have to look at it. Now I'm gonna research. So the thing is that so here's the thing. I think that only data from like the last 4 years would be valid. Like I'm gonna say 2018 and later. Okay, so I'm searching here. First one that I see is 2016. I think that that's too old. So here's one from Gallup. I bet what you're going to see is that it is less among minority groups than among white groups, but that it's growing across the board is my bet. Okay, Gallup finds younger white Americans are just as likely as Hispanic Americans, 15.5%, to identify as LGBT, with younger Black Americans slightly lower at 12.1%. And they're noting that the pace of increase is higher among Hispanics. I think that could support your theory. You know what I find kind of silly about all this? I think I can kind of bring this back to I mean, the reason this all gets started is because us trying to interpret the world in politics. And that can eventually come back into understanding political events that might have relevance to trading. But no direct relevance to trading right now. But if we're going more into the philosophical side of it, something that I don't understand is... well, for starters, the desire to be oppressed is, I think, kind of silly. When I was growing up, you know, it was never to your benefit to act like you were picked on, right? acting like you were picked on was just like likely to attract being picked on even more, and so even if you were being oppressed, quote unquote, it was to your advantage to pretend that you weren't, right? So I don't get that one. But why do we have to make it up? Like, unless you're a billionaire in this world, okay? And unless you're a globalist billionaire, everybody has struggles, Everybody has struggles, and they each have their individual struggles. I think there's one of the things I see a lot that drives me crazy is these mindset people, right? They're like, well, the reason that you're poor is because of your mindset. And once you stop having the poor mindset, then you can be rich. Well, mindset does help, okay? But I tell you what, it doesn't matter how good your mindset is. If the trading strategy that you're using sucks, you're going to lose money, period. The trading strategy that you're using is random, then you're going to get random results no matter how good your mindset is. Mindset is useless if it doesn't lead to correct actions. You know what I mean? And what I keep seeing out there is people adopting actions that aren't going to lead them to success, essentially. Right? Like it doesn't help anyone to come out here and be like, well, these people are really privileged and these people aren't. Because the reality is that the thing that will progress people and like bring more wealth to people is moving forward together as a society, right? Working together and understanding that, yes, some people have certain privileges and some people don't. Some people understand certain things and some people aren't. Some people are experts in this subject and some people are experts in this subject. And how can we work together to move the society together as a whole? Because when you start trying to pick each other apart, that doesn't lead to the progress. You notice has that led to progress in the X years that this has been around? I mean, it's really been before 2020, right? It's really been before 2020. Have any of these movements led to any kind of measurable improvement in anybody's lives? No, it hasn't, because the kind of the clash in this against this doesn't help anybody. It's everybody working together and you using your knowledge and you using your knowledge. It's the same thing I've been trying to get at with you guys with like the whole globalism thing, right? Is like, I understand that globalism has been very bad for a section of the US economy, okay? But the globalists, the people with the money and the power, do understand things that we don't. And I personally don't think that they're just like evil. I know that there's like this whole conspiracy theory that they're just devil worshippers and all. And I'm sure that it exists like somewhere. Like, I think that these kinds of rumors wouldn't exist if there wasn't at least like one rich person out there that was really into that stuff, right? But I think by and large, they want to help the world. And the way forward is to help them understand your side of it, right? Because the people at the top, they know a lot of things. They know a lot of things about the economy. But what they don't know is what's happening in your life. They seem, people have a very, very difficult time seeing beyond what's happening in their own lives. And so you have to work with them and show them. And every time that we come in and we like push a conspiracy theory about, well, this World Economic Forum is just a haven for globalists to oppress us, yada, yada, yada. Like, do you see why it's not productive, right? Because basically what you're doing is you're shutting down the line of communication, the one that we need the most right now, right? You'll be a globalist, far leftist, progressive before you know it, bro. I'd wager eventually your family will depend on it. No. I think that I just understand the world. I think that I'm fairly good at understanding the systems they exist today. So like, you get what I'm saying? Like, if I come in and I say, okay, like globalism is a problem, how do we fix it? Okay. And everybody, the populist right says, well, the answer is we need to have complete control of the government, and then we need to make a bunch of laws banning globalism, essentially. But I mean, that's kind of the take. And what I see is, well, if you put these far right extremists in power, you probably get an even worse situation, because a lot of these ideas that people have about the economy, especially like going on the gold standard and stuff like that, are crazy, right? So, and not only that, but when you go up against existing political structures like that, it usually doesn't end up well, right? You either get crushed, or if you're successful, you just end up putting somebody even more despotic in their place, right? That's what happens under communism. So it's been very rare. Like, the United States is the only time that I can think of where there was a revolution and things worked themselves out fairly quickly. I mean, even with America, it took like 10 years. Okay. You go and you look at, like, in France, that was a mess for decades. It was a mess for decades, right? So I think that to some extent, you want to work with and within existing power structures, because there are some benefits to these things, right? Because if you don't, you just tear everything down, then you take away all of the safety that's inherent in that, right? So I think a better solution would be to help the globalists understand where they're wrong and where their policy are causing problems. That's what I think is the best thing. Think you're good at rationalizing your way into where everyone with a bag of credentials is telling you to be? Well, I'm perfectly willing to call people out on something when they're wrong, and when they're using something that's incorrect, essentially, right? I mean, I think one of the biggest problems that we have here, I guess the example that I'm about to give you isn't a good example, because it's really, if you think about it politically speaking, it's a left-leaning idea. The markets are not efficient, and so many people make decisions based on the market being entirely efficient. The libertarian types would like to think that that's the case, but it's not. And I think that has to inform our policy to some extent. They don't see where their policies cause problems because they're disconnected from the impacts of their policies. Yeah. That's why it's easy for you to entertain unity between when you have absolutely no middle ground. But there is a middle ground, though. So you don't understand. If we help the country and the economy as a whole continue to progress, everybody benefits, right? And like, the thing that I think is silly about this particular issue is that it's already shifting, right? I think that the people on the right still feel like they're fighting this do or die battle against globalism. And the reality is that the globalists are shifting towards the populist line of thinking. I think that it wasn't that the populists convinced the globalists. It was that the globalists basically had no choice but to admit where the world was going after Russia invaded Ukraine, right? And then when China kind of tacitly supported Russia instead of the United States, right? Then they had no choice but to move your direction, right? So it's not about it's not about what's right or wrong. It's about what's going to be the most effective way for you to get what you want, right? So if you want certain globalist policies to be done away with, right? Coming in and pissing off the people with the power probably isn't the way to do it, right? what one side is willing to do for that shared benefit is the antithesis of what the other side is. Well, I don't agree with that at all. I think that the other side has done what they've done and held to it so strictly is because they thought that was what was best for everybody. They said free trade is good. Free trade develops economies. Look, we have free trade. Look at how much the economy has grown. Look at how much the economy grew in the 90s, for instance, right? They said, oh, these are really positive things, right? And they just couldn't see the negatives of it, right? Now that the negatives are like impossible to ignore, now you've kind of got the issue of you've let these people get so high into power that there's certain people at the top that really do just only care about themselves. But ultimately, I believe that most Americans are patriots and will do the right thing for the country if you can convince them that that's the case. But you don't start convincing people by pissing them off. by calling them, devil worshippers and making up rumors that may or may not be true. I'm sure that there are some people out there doing that kind of hedonistic nonsense, but I don't think that that's everybody over there. See, people don't want. I think this morning people don't want to hear about globalism. I mean, it's the same thing for me, right? So like, people don't like being told that their entire strategy, the entire thing that they based their like entire identity on, like they're banking their identity on, I'm a trader, I'm going to become a rich trader, and this is the way that I'm going to go about it. And then coming in and telling them, well, everything that you've learned, everything that you're doing to go about achieving your goal is completely worthless. Nobody likes to hear that, right? It's like almost a pure attack on their identity, right? We have to find messaging that's, more effective. I mean, I think that pissing on technical analysis is a good way to get attention on in the YouTube algorithm, but we need to come up with a better narrative that isn't about attacking technical analysis and is more just drawing people in on the efficacy of what we're talking about. Next topic, Seth. How oil is actually made from mantle and is actually so I've heard about that one, and I don't. It's really weird. So I've seen people make their arguments about it, and I don't believe that it's abiotic or anything like that. I just think it's weird that people can pull out a set of facts that seem to so directly contradict everything, right? It's like, where does this come from? Like they're talking about how, 50 years ago or whatever, we did believe that it was abiotic, right? It wasn't until much more recently that they just decided that it comes from plankton or something like that. But it's kind of it is one thing that I have read that, I'm not an expert in oil exploration, right? But they're saying that it is generating constantly, essentially. Like that there's this idea that there's a limited amount of oil in the world. Well, that's not true. It'll continue generating. There's just maybe You just don't want to use it faster than it's generating, right? About 100 years, it was believed until about 1920 that crude is made from sand, because till then, all the deposits we knew were in the desert. That's interesting. Well, you know, this is another thing that we constantly come into, though, right? Which is that we have to make decisions sometimes about subjects that we don't have a complete knowledge of, right? I don't think that we 100% understand the generation of oil deposits. Like, I don't think that we can come in and predict where oil deposits are going to be 1,000 years from now, for instance. This is where, you know, the frustrating part about it is that I think that the way forward on most subjects is to take an empirical and scientific approach to things. But the issue is that in many instances, science has been hijacked for political purposes, right? Or there's just junk science out there that prevents us from being able to make correct decisions. So, like, if we just assume that there's an issue with global warming and so on and so forth, okay? I'm not saying that there is or there isn't. I'm just saying, for the sake of argument, let's say that there is. What's the best way to fix it, right? Well, that's the purview of economics, not climate change, right? And I'm seeing all these people use climate change as a reason for the government to get involved, and that just contradicts everything that we know about how these kinds of problems get solved, right? And then they come up with all this junk science to support it. Kind of not cool. Well, the Treasury, you know, like, initially we had that drop down, and I thought, well, it could snowball, but like, since that time, it has really gone sideways. This Treasury market is really light today. Now we got to keep in mind, I have to remember, hey, Steven, where have you been? Good to see you again. But we have the Chicago PMI coming up, so we need to keep an eye out for that. That's going to be in 14 minutes, where the subscribers get the news early. So, you broke your right wrist? Oh, dude, how did you do that? Yeah, exactly, Tobias. Climate change should be seen as an innovation driver, not as a problem. Yeah, and like, one of the issues is that if the private market does not see an incentive to develop technologies to tackle that there's a larger problem with our economy. Not that doesn't mean that the government needs to come in and provide all of the money, right? Because what they're doing is they're using it as a guise to give the government greater control over a larger share of the economy, right? Which is not efficient. I've seen a bunch of cars this year with hydrogen fuel cells in them, so maybe things are changing. Because the whole electric car thing, I don't think that's sustainable. Like, we used to think, oh, you know, in 30 years everybody will have an electric car. I'm starting to think that electric cars will be kind of like a temporary station that not everybody completely moves over to, and we like skip over it. You know what I mean? Kind of like like, I think electric cars are like the equivalent of a Palm Pilot, right? Like the Palm Pilot was the future, but then it got leapfrogged by the iPhone, right? And then Palm Pilot died really, really quickly. I think that the same thing might happen with electric cars, because we can't sustain the amount of energy that would be required for everybody to have an electric car. We just can't. We just don't have the infrastructure or the energy. And even if we develop it as fast as we can, we wouldn't come anywhere close. The Ice Exchange tweets a joke. What did the fortune teller say to the oil trader? Not to be crude about your future, but your options are expiring soon. In other words, Tesla's over 100%. It's overvalued. Yep. But now Elon Musk owns Twitter, right? So who knows what he does. Tesla is a great example of orders move markets, for sure. So everybody says, well, people aren't valuing the company right because it's all of these extra things and stuff. Yeah, but I'm pretty sure that its stock price is just due to it being the most well-known name. Same with Apple. I think that I'm not going to go and short Apple, but I think it's overvalued. Or maybe I guess it's better now that things have kind of come in, right? It's kind of this thing. You're just seeing a lot of people talking about like, oh, okay. Like after the pandemic, we come in and we look at things and it seems like it's all of the little things, all of the base level things that we're having problems with. We're not producing enough energy. We're not producing enough homes. We're not this, that, and the other sort of a thing, right? And everybody's like, how did we get to this point? Well, dude, I'll tell you how you got to this point. You had interest rates at practically zero for a decade, right? Some businesses do well when interest rates are rising, and some businesses do well. Some businesses do well when interest rates are rising, and some businesses do well when interest rates are falling. And the companies that like energy and exploration, things like that, tend to do better with the higher interest rates, is my understanding. Utilities in particular, right? So yeah, no wonder you keep the interest rates at rock bottom for a decade. They don't develop the utilities as well, right? We had malinvestment because of low interest rates, and now we're paying for it. That's what's going on. That's what's going on. You put it all into tech and created frankly a monster. Big tech has become a monster, right? And then you left all these other places underdeveloped. I think that's pretty simple way of looking at it, right? Of course, there's all sorts of interesting and complicated dynamics under the surface, but I think that that's the highest level view that you can take, is that you had interest rates low for so long, it's created malinvestment. Let's see here. Goldman Sachs on the UK household exposure to rates. Also, there remains the unknown of how vulnerable households are to higher mortgage costs, and while rate expectations have declined from the peak rate, hikes are still likely to be steep. All right, because most people in the UK don't have like a 30-year mortgage, and so the costs will increase on them. A little step up to the VWAP at 23 in the 10-year. I suppose if I wanted to go short the treasury, that the VWAP would be a great place to do it, but I'm still just not seeing a whole lot of activity there. I am seeing overall the 30-year and the 10-year, the volume is to the long side. It's only been by about 3,000 contracts, so. Short corn? Okay. Oh, wow. Yeah, I can see a bit of a move starting there in corn for sure. Interesting. But they're up 1.73% on the day, so this looks like it's a pullback. I'm seeing, for some reason, all of a sudden I'm seeing, well, it's not all of a sudden, like I'm seeing a lot of reports about what the weather in Europe is likely to be just this week. Like, I would expect people to be unusually interested in the weather this year, right? Because of oil, because of heating costs and stuff like that. But it's kind of weird that I haven't gotten anything until today, and then now all of a sudden today I'm getting a bunch of stuff. So what I'm hearing is that in the UK the winter is likely to be unusually cold, but that they're having a heat wave in the UK right now, and that it's likely to last another week or two. The supply of corn is decreasing because Russia stopped the export deal. Why short it? Well, just looking at the chart, it looks like they opened up higher and are retracing, and that he's just getting a momentum play. The average duration of mortgages in the UK is about 25 years though. Well, I was reading that it's not all mortgages, but a much larger portion of the mortgages in the UK are like variable rate. The interest rates can change on them. Depopulation. Listen, there's some people on the left that think that we need to curb the population growth, but I think that almost all of the demographics people involved and the experts on this matter are very concerned about where demographics are going. So there was a big order just now there pushing us down. It was there at 21. Oh, so we traded it. That is really interesting to me. So we fell back down fairly quickly. At least those last few ticks were fairly quick. And then somebody puts the big offer out and they fill it. Because when you see an order like that come out, you think, well, he's trying to force the market down even more. But they almost immediately fill them. So I guess that means that there's two sides to this market. That also increases the cumulative delta by a ton. Is scalping not going to hold offside funds big time? Short NATO and EU going to escort Ukraine grain, I hear. Okay, so we're going to get the Chicago PMI here in a minute or two, right? I forget, it's 8 minutes early, right? Three minutes before the public time release. So at 7:42 my time. I am just happy with getting another store contract that barely moves the STR. You really like them when they're stationary, huh? I was watching this video from a guy that was trading this sort of stuff. I think that they were like trying to do a presentation about European rates to I forget which site it was. But anyways, this guy was just showing all these charts, and he was looking for ones that were extremely stationary. And the strategy was pretty simple. It was just look for something stationary and get in, and he was like trading a bunch of different instruments at the same time, looking for those kinds of opportunities. It's kind of weird. So they're kind of like realizing that, you know, interest rates are kind of interesting because there is a lot of math behind it. But when it comes to the treasuries, which are kind of like the basis for everything else, they really aren't very sensitive to news. And so you would normally want to come in and do some sort of, you know, market making, look for a stationary kind of range to scalp sort of a thing. But you really can't in the treasuries, at least not at current times, because it moves by news so much. By the way, I read the discussion paper on the ZN basket adjustment. Yeah, I think it probably will be better in the long run. I mean, the main gist of it was, well, you guys can get the exposure that you really want through TN. So we really should just make ZN closer to 7 years so that the cheapest to deliver is consistent, essentially. I think it's the right take. What is this insider info you possess? You're talking about, I'm hearing the EU is going to escort Ukraine grain, I hear. It seems to me that if the Russians started to attack Ukrainian grain, that could cause all sorts of issues, right? So I'm a little bit skeptical. You know what's kind of hilarious to me? You remember the whole Meet Kevin thing? So Meet Kevin, he spends all this time saying, you know, buy and hold is the best way and yada, yada, yada. And then he comes out and he's all, I think there's going to be a famine and everybody's going to be starving this summer. So I'm taking all of my money out, right? Well, it ended up being a good trade as far as I understand. I don't know what he did after that, if he ever got back in or if he's still out or whatever the deal is. But the entire premise that he took the trade on was nonsense, right? So everybody was expecting there to be like this great, now maybe it happens next year, but everybody said it was going to happen this year and it didn't. I'm new to order flow. Where can I learn, like, from beginner? I have a couple of videos on this channel that are for beginners. So I have a playlist about order flow, and just watch down that playlist. And that starts with the very basics. And you might watch those videos and be like, well, this gets pretty advanced pretty quickly. But like the whole thing is watch those videos and then watch the action. Because I feel like it's stuff that is really hard to understand unless you're regularly watching it happen. Right? Screen time is the most important thing. Oops. So we are 2 ticks down. We got about a minute and a half before the Chicago PMI news comes out. I'm kind of concerned from seeing the way this is going. I'm kind of concerned. Well, either the Chicago PMI ends up being really good and that pushes the markets down, or like it ends up being like just kind of so-so, but then the treasuries are like, oh, just kidding, we were going to sell it the whole time anyways. Doesn't matter what the number was going to be. Or you might see one of those sorts of things happen. Why? Because they got to hedge themselves or do whatever they got to do for the Federal Reserve meeting this week, right? Oh, what's this from Nick Timoros? I missed. A bigger concern would be around the politics of losing money if inflation control proves to be even harder. The laws thus create an opening for any number of critiques from elected officials. It's not an arrangement anyone else in the economy gets to enjoy except for them. Oh, he's talking about the Federal Reserve running at a loss. How are you getting the news 8 minutes? So it's not 8 minutes early, it's 3 minutes early. And it gets released to subscribe. So watch. I won't know what the number is, but watch the order flow here in 10 seconds. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so it sounds like the number, just based off of that, the number was probably bad. So it gets released to subscribers 3 minutes early, and then in 3 minutes it will be released to the public and we'll be able to see. But just from that reaction right there, you can almost certainly bet that it's going to be worse than expected. So let's see here. They were looking for a reading of 47. I'm going to bet that it's more like 46, 45 and a half. Something like that. It did move up, but not too much. So this is like I was saying, it's like, okay, so maybe the news happens and ends up being good, but it could be the case that they were just planning on selling it anyways, right? Well, that shift in cumulative delta was significant though, so. Is order flow good for swing trading and day trading or only scalping? Well, so there was a time when you could come in and watch the DOM and do things like catch the edge and play on icebergs and make money just from doing that. Like 2000s, like the early 2000s, that's how a lot of these traders that really made it big in the early 2000s made their money. But now the robots, since 2008, the robots have become so strong. Those kinds of strategies aren't very effective. So, I recommend you go more for an informed trading approach. And while you can do it day trading, there are some really big advantages to doing it swing trading as well, right? So you can have flows that you can predict that can be persistent for days and weeks, right? Like when a big country is selling a lot of their treasuries, that's something that you'll see come in and happen like every day for weeks. That, yeah, anything that helps you save a tick is good no matter what type of trade. Yeah. So that's the other side of it, is that the order flow is really useful for timing and getting a good price on your trades overall. So it's beneficial to any style of trading, really. All right, 10 seconds till it gets released to the public. Oh, was okay. 45 spot 2. So I said 45 spot 5. 45 spot 2. That's less than the previous one. So that suggests that the economy continues to contract further. And you see how when that news came out to the public, no reaction to it, right? It's because the big traders got it 3 minutes ago. That was a pretty close call, but I mean, it's in a situation where you can't really. It's kind of like, that would be an interesting one to do. Is like anytime news comes through, watch the reaction to the news, and then go back and try and predict what the actual number was. After you've already seen the market reaction to it. That would be an interesting exercise, wouldn't it? Whom are they? I don't know who they subscribe to. I don't know who it is that releases it. Wait, let's see if I can find out here from Forex Factory. Oh, ISM. It's from ISM. So yeah. Akshay knows. Akshay, you're just so knowledgeable, man. So the way that order flow can help you is, let's just say that you had something that said, I want to go long right now. Okay. So where do you do it? What price do you get? Well, the liquidity conditions are still fairly light. It's a Monday, so things are a little slow at the beginning of the week. That's kind of like what it was like last week too, right? But it seems to be trading pretty freely here between 21 and 21.5. So if I wanted to get along, should I put a limit order at 21 or should I put a market order in at 21.5? Well, I think the current liquidity conditions suggest that you have a fair chance of getting filled at 21, right? So if you're not looking at the book, you might not necessarily know that. And that's a tick, you know, like if that's just one tick, there you go. So you would have gotten filled at 21. Now we could say, can you get filled lower than that? Maybe 20.5. It'd be a little bit harder though. It's 240 a year. Wait, what? I don't know. The Chicago PMI is in particular a weird one, right? Because it's one that is not typically rated as like a high impact, and yet if there's any piece of news that I think like surprises people, it's that one. If only for the fact that it gets released to some people early. Anyways, the order flow over the last week has been like, even though liquidity conditions are improving, it's not very good up here from above 22.5, right? They're only putting 800s up. We were like at 1500s at most prices by the end of the week last week. So that means that, you know, this could move around quite a bit, right? If I was to take a long, I think I'd have to be pretty careful about where I bid at. Because the risk that they slip through here and come down to the bottom is pretty good. Also, the S&P 500 has been open now for about 20 minutes, and we're not getting very many clues over there either, are we? I think that the flows should be skewed to the upside in the S&P 500 still. Although I'm told it wouldn't take very much for it to flip around. It was like 38 something, right? Yeah, 38.50. Looks like the dollar index calling for 5. The dollar index is moving, isn't it? Is the Japanese yen moving? Maybe a teeny bit. It looks like the pressure's coming more from the euro and the British pound than it is from the Japanese yen. That's curious. Was just about to short 60. Yeah, I kind of like that one. 60 doesn't look too bad. Doesn't look too shabby. Good. Kill the euro. You guys. What do you got against the euro, actually? So to everything that we were talking about, I think that I have to be leaning short on the treasuries, right? Because I can see the currencies going that way. So correlated assets are in line with the short. And I think that there's some news headlines kind of suggest that things aren't as bullish as some bond traders assumed last week. And there's going to be people bracing themselves for the Federal Reserve meeting. And especially if the S&P 500 continues this downturn, right? That also is kind of pushing them down, and the delta on that is pretty solid too. So I think that I don't think that I'm getting strong enough low coming through in the treasury to justify a trade. And the cumulative deltas aren't in line. But let's just kind of keep in the back of my mind here, short. It's an unholy existence that goes against God and everything that's The euro, like whether the euro was a good thing or not is you could spend too much time talking about that one, right? I think that there was a lot of good ideas about it, but like many things, kind of comes down to implementation, right? The way that things have been implemented over there in Europe are pretty terrible. Now, one might argue that it's kind of inevitable that it would go badly, but I don't know enough about European politics to say. There's a big bid there at 18.75 in the 5-year. Seems to be supporting them. What you got here? A Bloomberg article? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Goldman Sachs now sees Fed rates peaking at 5% in March. So they're saying there'll be another interest rate hike in January and March. That will be 25 basis points each. And that just puts them in line with like the consensus expectation. So that one's not really a huge change. I was kind of surprised because I was reading, Jan had CSI. I was kind of surprised that he waited that long. So I don't know. Treasury is still very tight here. But remember we saw that big spoof and it traded and I was like, yeah. So how long ago was that? That was like 7:30 or so. Let's call it 7:30. So we might be stuck here for another 10-15 minutes. I need to go and wake my my child up. So I'm gonna go check on them, all right? I'll be right back. Okay. I don't know if they're actually gonna wake up. They were pretty dead asleep. I'm like, nah, you let him sleep in past 8. He's not gonna go to bed on the right time. She thinks it has to do with when he takes his nap, but I'm telling you, you gotta wake up and go to sleep at the same time. Because he's like me. He's got the ADHD like me. He gets sleep problems. I disagree vehemently with you, Akshay. I am somehow of the opinion that the Fed's pivot will be the long-term inflation target is 4% and not 2%. So first of all, just from like a purely academic perspective, I've never really seen good research to justify that the inflation target should be one value or another value. I honestly think that the only reason why it's 2% is because, that gives you 2 $1,000 payments a year for a treasury. I think that's what it comes down to. But it makes the math easy. But I actually suspect that it may be better for it to be slightly less than 2%. I digress. I think it's probably splitting hairs. But to the point, would the Federal Reserve do it? I think there's almost zero chance that the Federal Reserve will do it. I keep seeing Zero Hedge say that, and there's this one guy that Zero Hedge like really holds up as like even the Federal Reserve pays attention to this economist, and he's saying that they're going to have to change the inflation target. The problem with that is that can you imagine the impact that would have on inflation expectations, right? If the Federal Reserve comes in and says, well, now our inflation target is 4%, that would be a disaster. It would be so bad, I think. $2% came from an RBNZ's paper from 1992 that said that in Western/developed world, the long-term population growth will be 2%, so that's what we should target as inflation. Well, but should inflation be slightly more than the population rate? Or slightly less than the population rate? But it's been slightly less than the population rate, hasn't it? Well, we're moving up. I was saying, hey, maybe we want to go short. But no, they're moving up. I'm seeing, now what is with this? I'm seeing a bit of a drop in the cryptocurrencies. It seems like the dollar looks strong here. Is it? Well, something that we have seen lately has been treasuries buying up on these negative economic reports. So, which wasn't happening for the longest time, but. Yes. Well, I remember there was a Federal Reserve meeting where Chairman Powell was asked why 2%. And he basically, it was kind of a funny answer because he basically said, we don't really have a good reason. It's like, well, there's lots of different things, but, it's kind of arbitrary. He admitted basically that it's an arbitrary anchor. One of the things is I felt for a really long time, really starting from 2017, I would say, I felt like, interest rates need to be higher. There are real social costs to having interest rates low for so long. It seems to be turning into lower inflation, which is a problem too. And having inflation below target for such a long time is also bad. And so it wouldn't be necessarily a bad thing to see a little bit of inflation so that, things like people's debt on their homes gets wiped away by those income increases and so on and so forth, right? But I think that since COVID, that the amount of inflation that we have seen far outweighs and washes out all of the low inflation that we had in the 2010s. Yeah, probably. Anyways, to the 2% thing, I've seen both Nick Timiraos and Fed Guy both say that like a change of the inflation target is like out of the question. So I wouldn't be putting a bet on that happens. In fact, if there was like some sort of pure betting contract to bet on that, I would take it. You feel it should be 0? I don't think it should be 0. because that tiny bit of inflation gives people the incentive to put their money to work, right? So here's a thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately, which is we're seeing the boomers leave the workforce, and what are the effects of inflation supposed to be on that? It certainly seems to be, I mean, there's a lot of things that are affecting productivity, right? And then the new generations aren't having very many kids. But like in another 10 years from now, when the boomers start dying and they pass their wealth on, has anybody done the math on that? Like, because there's going to be a lot, there's tons of taxes on that stuff. I look at it as like, wow, they tax so much when you when you die. No wonder the rich put so much effort into trying to preserve as much of that wealth as possible. It's kind of sucks because it really only hurts the middle class, I feel. Like there's this whole thing of like, well, we don't want these people to be rich and like they continue to keep all the wealth. That's why we need to have inheritance taxes. But the truly rich people have enough that it doesn't matter. And they have ways around it. And so who does it actually take the wealth away from? The middle class people that worked hard and saved up something for their kids, and then the government takes it. That's really crappy, right? But so has anybody done any math on how much government revenue they'll bring in when the baby boomers die? Has anybody done any math about like how that's going to affect the incomes of their millennial children, Gen X and millennial children? You know? I'll point you to RBI's working papers. Most of their work during periods of high inflation, people, for one reason or another, tend to save more locked in at long duration at that. Select any, yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying though, right? Is inflation, having a certain amount of inflation is good because it really forces people. It really forces people to have to save. So, well, not just save, but it's save or spend, right? But you can't just put it under your mattress, right? Whereas if it was less than zero, right? If it was deflationary, we know what would happen there, right? If it was deflationary, then the best thing would be to just always keep your money stowed away. It would be bad for the economy overall. Now, I think that there might be an argument for zero, but if going by, no, so I think the thing is it's not just save or spend, right? It's also how they choose to spend it and how they choose to save it, right? So when you have a certain amount of inflation, it greatly incentivizes people to go and take risk on, right? In other words, you're not going to be able to retire comfortably unless you put the money into the stock market. Whereas if inflation was zero or negative, you would still save. It's just, you might save it. You would be able to be okay with saving it in less risky assets, right? You'd be able to just keep it in cash or a pension. Put it in a pension. What are junk bonds? So junk bonds are securities, bonds issued by corporations that have a credit rating below a B minus, I believe. Kind of depends because there's two ratings agencies and they use different numbers, but basically they have a lower credit rating. And so the yields on them are much higher because the risk of default is much higher. Yeah, so it'll have a high yield. I need to go and review that now. I've never seen a question that tested the ratings numbers specifically though, so. So going back to Bitcoin, for instance, right? Because Bitcoin is deflationary. Basically, the whole idea behind Bitcoin is that the inflation rate should be below zero. That's basically Bitcoin's deal, right? And you can see how it's worked out, right? Because it almost becomes useless as a means of transaction because people want to hold it. And like everybody tries to encourage you to hold it because they know that the more people that hold it, the more that it'll go up, right? That's the whole basis behind the HODL cult. They know that it's deflationary, right? But they also thought that it was going to become a means of transaction, and then when that kind of failed, they just like memory hold it, pretended that that's what it was about. It's a store of value, right? It hasn't been very good for Bitcoin. It would have been better for Bitcoin if the amount of coins, well, not better, but I think what it should have been is for 10 or 20 years, the Bitcoin will do a halving cycle like it's been, but then after that, it'll actually, the amount of supply each year will increase by 2%. That would have been better for Bitcoin in the long run. Oh, well. But even then, it would really, it's even better if it's something you can control, right? Yeah, how many forks has it had? That's, yeah. I mean, the reality is that there's infinite coins because everybody makes altcoins, but it was the deflationary nature of it that really killed it as being used in transactions. It's kind of sad. Like a lot of people are like, this always kind of happens when things are really high, right? Like back in 2017, right? It's been 5 years now, right? 5 years later, how's that worked out for you? Didn't come back, did it? But I guess the point here is that economies are unstable enough that you need to be able to manipulate the money supply. If you can manipulate the money supply to reduce those swings, it's beneficial to the system as a whole. It's just we're still not super great at knowing what we need to set the level at. There's still much to learn, but it's better than it was. It's better than it was. I just think that whole bit is an important thing to understand because I feel that a lot of the anti-central bank, ever having any kind of inflation whatsoever kind of attitude that's shared by many, many, many people out there leads to erroneous analysis in bonds. Well, in markets overall, let's say. Well, I want to say, I mean, we are above the 21 area, but this 22.5 has kind of been like a hard ceiling. I will clear up above us. But it's starting to look like I'm just not going to take a trade today, and I'm perfectly okay with that. It makes me wonder how slow it's going to be tomorrow, because it's really unusually quiet. It's really unusually quiet. Let's see here. Mohammed A. El Arian, the just released Chicago PMI report is yet another data point the Fed may wish to consider. The numbers suggest that the U.S. economy is slowing at a faster rate than most expect, and consistent with what is helping elsewhere in the global economy. Live action agrees that it's a crummy trading day. Yeah. On a day like today, I was like, well, I don't know if the viewership has been low because the market action has been crappy or because they don't like what we're talking about. Oh, well. Anytime that something like that happens, though, I just have to say to myself, well, I mean, it's better that we don't get too popular. I feel like that we're learning things and having a good discussion. That's the most important thing, right? You farted? Why would you tell me that? Listen, do you have any idea how often I fart on stream? And you guys don't know because I mute the microphone first? It's like every 5 minutes. I'm not even kidding. I have gastrointestinal issues. I don't tell you about it, except for this one time because you told me about it. Jeez. How did you guys come down on our survey, by the way? 22 votes and it's 50-50. I've never seen one of our polls come out that equal. Yeah, so next time Seth is quiet, I am assume. If I'm going like this, if I mute the microphone, you know, I kind of move over a little bit in the video, you know that's what I'm doing. Ulcerative colitis isn't fun, folks. Don't get it. If there's anything you could do to prevent yourself from getting it. I wish we understood what caused it, because it sucks. It seems like something that should be treatable, preventable. You know, like you got to eat a certain your diet is bad or something like that. You took too many antibiotics. You had ulcerative. I've never heard of anyone where I've heard of like remission, but never cured ulcerative colitis, or let's just say, what do we call it? IBS, inflammatory bowel syndrome. It's kind of more the general. But I have a pretty bland diet overall because of that. But I need to eat more vegetables. Well, let's, I want to head over to Zero Hedge here and see what they've got. If there's been any other new interesting stories pop through here. Much of Ukrainian capital without power and water. Tesla held talks with mining giant Glencore over an equity stake. That's interesting. The entry-level house has become a myth. You know something I find interesting. So can I comment on this housing thing? Because you've all seen that chart where it's like shows how much housing has the cost of a house has increased, and that it's like some of the most unaffordable levels ever. But the thing is that only a few years ago, housing was at some of its most affordable ever. And yet, it seemed like very few people could actually afford it, right? So it seems to me, I continue to come in here and look at these things like for instance, wages have stagnated, right? Well, that's because much more of the compensation goes into benefits, and then you have to adjust for inflation, and there's different ways of adjusting for inflation and stuff like that. But if you just go off of that pure analysis, then basically what it's coming down to is people are spending too much on healthcare, and because of that, they can't get into a house now. It's kind of what this is kind of my conclusion. Vegetables need to be cooked. Well, whatever it is, just as long as it's fiber. As long as it's fiber for the good bacteria to live in. Is this turning into a larger upswing? I am kind of wondering if there's not going to be more upside here just because the number was bad, right? No fiber. No, I want the fiber. I want the fiber for. So if it's being caused by a bacterial imbalance, then you need to eat more fiber. Even though fiber does kind of like irritate the walls, right? Well, we don't know what causes it. That's the whole thing. So I read. So can I? Oh, I need to find this study for you if you have it. I read a very compelling study that suggested that. Well, it wasn't suggested. Here's what they did. I'll just say what the study was. They studied people with IBS for plastics, and they found that people with IBS had more plastic in their gut than the average person, than the control, suggesting that IBS was caused by plastic. Isn't that interesting? And when you think about it, it's a compelling explanation, especially if things like polyester fibers could inflame your gut, right? So really what that's saying is like wear pure cotton, and I think most of my stuff has polyester in it. I need to start buying cotton shirts, I guess. Nice cotton shirts. And then maybe I won't be so bad. But, you know, because they've had so much difficulty in tracking down what causes it and everything else like that, plastic just seems like an explanation that ticks all of the boxes on why it's so difficult for them to figure out. I would caution that it's just like one study and that they're just at the beginning of that, but wouldn't that be interesting? So then you would have an argument for people to go 100% no plastic. So Jack Ripper from Dr. Strangelove wasn't so off the mark and might even be. Oh, dude, fluoride is a problem. So like it's not necessarily bad to have fluoride in your water, but what I have learned from people in the water business is that they aren't very careful about how much fluoride they put in. And so some people are getting way more fluoride than they're supposed to. And that is bad for you. When I was young, polyester was the cheap clothes. Today it is the fashion. Well, it still is the cheap clothes though, right? Like the whole thing, haven't you been to H&M? Man, let me tell you, that store H&M's whole business strategy is you're only going to wear it 5 times and then it will be out of style, is H&M's strategy. So nothing is built to last. You wash it 10 times and it's done. Right? Yeah, or Shein. Shein is another serial violator or whatever you want to call it. So it's kind of interesting. Like there's some of these fashion brands where it's like you go and buy a shirt and it's like it's $100 shirt or whatever. And you'd be like, how that's so ridiculous. How can a shirt be so expensive? Especially when it's like a plain shirt and stuff like that. But it actually turns out that it is worth it because there are like, so first of all, pure cotton is more expensive, right? But then there's different like qualities of cotton, and having longer cotton fibers results in a more clean yarn, and which makes a much smoother shirt. The shirt is not only smoother and feels better, but it lasts longer. So you can get like a good quality, and then especially if you get wool, especially if you get something that's wool, that can last for decades. I should probably buy more clothes. I don't. I wear these shirts, overwear these shirts. Like I think I owned this shirt when we started the stream, so I think I've had this shirt for 5 years. And I don't necessarily like having shirts that are graphic. I would prefer for the stream to just have a plain t-shirt. A nice shirt, but a plain colored one. And maybe not so much. I wish I had more stuff that was red because my background is teal. So if my background is teal, then that means that I probably would look better in red to stand out from the background. Anyways, so let's say that it was proven that it was plastic and that I have to get everything that's even remotely plastic out of my life, right? It's like freaking impossible, dude. It's like impossible. In the 1920s, polo shirts came out and are still in style today. Yeah, I could do more polos. Polos are so hit and miss, to be honest with you. So I got that one polo that is that dark gray one. But I don't feel like that one matches with much. It's just a little bit too that brand was too desaturated. Let's say. It was a good shirt. I think that my wife hung it up the wrong place though. Because it's not in my closet. Oh man. She definitely did not wake up. They did not get out of the bed. She said, I'll just leave the door open and we'll wake up because you're so loud. No, you're just an unusually light sleeper, dear. So that means that he's probably not going to go to bed on time today. That's probably what's going to happen. Maybe I'll keep him up. I wasn't planning on taking him trick-or-treating because I don't think he gets it, but maybe I will. Just to make him extra tired. Because I do not want another. He came in, he like woke up at like 3 o'clock. Woke up at 3 o'clock, was up until I got up. So for like 2 hours. And now they're dead asleep. Not cool. And I'm afraid that what's going to happen is he'll go to bed late again. Or he'll go to bed too early again. That's what's going to happen. It'll be like 4 o'clock. He'll want to go to sleep. Man, even Twitter has been unusually quiet today. We did get a little extension above this range, but like, look, they snapped right back into it. Yeah, tomorrow maybe the data will be better. Well, Asher, what are the kids dressing up for Halloween as? Asher has a puppy costume. Oh my gosh. So on Friday, so in Utah we do a trunk or treat. So everybody gets their cars to the church parking lot, and then you just go around to the church parking lot. Back when I was a missionary outside of Utah, that was like all people did. Like, people didn't trick or treat in the actual neighborhood. But here we basically get to do it twice. So we go to the trunk or treat. So I'm getting the costume on Asher. He's 2.5. He did not want to wear that. He fought so hard about wearing the dog costume. It's like a husky costume. I couldn't. It was so weird. I mean, once we got there, he was fine. I still don't think he gets trick or treating, because like he took the candy and he wanted candy, but then like he doesn't want to eat the candy that he picked. He wants to go and steal from the other kids, and throws a total fit when we won't let him in their bedrooms so that he can steal their candy. And then the infant has a dragon costume. But we're not planning on doing anything tonight. See, this is the first time I've even brought up that today is Halloween. To be honest with you, I've never been a fan of Halloween. I feel like, is this why I don't like Halloween? No, but I'm just going to trash Halloween here now just for the sake of Halloween. Halloween, that is for being your favorite holiday, is for people that, you know, don't want to exhibit self-control. That's what it's about. Is they would rather be mischievous and or eating tons of candy all the freaking time, but they know that you need to be good. And this is like the one night of the year where they can like let go and dress slutty and eat tons of crap and etc, etc, etc. That's kind of how I feel about the holiday. And like, I hate having to put together costumes. Ugh. And you know, it's either you're walking around the neighborhood with the kids trick-or-treating, or you're constantly answering the door. Either of those sucks. No, I could see why some single people might enjoy the holiday, but my ex, she really liked how that was her favorite holiday, but I was never into it. And then she left just before Thanksgiving, so I'm not particularly fond of Thanksgiving either. 4th of July, though. 4th of July is my kind of holiday, my friends. Cook, barbecuing, and pyrotechnics. What is better? I don't know why people aren't more into the 4th of July. The best holiday. Well, and Christmas. Christmas is, of course, the best holiday because you get stuff. But it's kind of hinting that it wants to move up, but it's still being like super tentative about it. Still being super tentative about it. So were you guys offended by my comments about Halloween? Yes, looks like it was. I'm interested what's going on here in Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin saw a pretty decent drop there, and nothing else seems to be correlated with it. It's so bad in some states in Germany we have public holiday today, and other states don't have it. So we don't. It's not a public holiday here. We all work today. That just reminds me that I didn't really take very good advantage of the time that I had this weekend. So I did do the test on Friday, and there was a big list of things that we had to do. One of the things was that we got Asher a haircut and it looked terrible, so we went somewhere else to get his haircut fixed. stuff like that. I did work on the table, but I didn't like write scripts for the stream or anything like that. I just had fun. Okay, Joseph Wing, a treasury buyback program funded by bill issuance, would be mechanically equivalent to quantitative easing and risk positive. This post shows why it would be mechanically equivalent to quantitative easing and reviews two channel through which QE impacts markets. Oh, and it's an article on his own blog, so I should read that. I'm kind of surprised that, I mean, I guess we should expect it to be slow on a Monday and everything, but it's also like the last day of the month, you know? Watch, it'll be like going into the close, there will be like this huge move and everybody will be like, where did that come from? I don't see a catalyst here for Bitcoin. It just dropped hard for no apparent reason. Yep, no real news. Oh, I had a comment on r/day trading that got a lot of responses. Was like my most popular comment in months. And it wasn't that complicated. It's not the top comment on there, is it? Oh, it is. My comment got more upvotes than the main thread. All I said was the answer to why the market made any kind of move always starts with the orders. The orders are what moves the market. When market orders overwhelm the resting liquidity, it moves price. So while the overall numbers of buys and sells is always the same, one side can be more aggressive, causing price to move. Then he talked about the flows that were currently in the market. And I was just so surprised that that one did so well. I was like, oh, maybe we are singling in on the messaging that we need to help teach people this stuff. This person was asking that the cumulative delta for the NQ and mini NQ differs. So Let's answer them. Cumulative delta can be quite a bit more messy for an equity index. I mean, all of these instruments. Okay. That's a good question. It's one that has been asked on the stream a lot, right? Is that, especially in the S&P 500, it's like the cumulative and delta and price don't line up right, and the cumulative delta between the DES and the micro ES don't line up. Well, you want to go with the more liquid instrument, but the S&P 500, there's a lot more noise. That's why I don't trade it. So let's see here. Any change in the poll? Oh, it's still 50-50. Man. Well, it's going to be interesting to see if that shifts. We'll do that again on Wednesday, and we'll see if you guys feel differently then. Man, when you go on to Reddit, for instance, it's just like everybody's piling on Facebook. It's not like it's not deserved, but it's just like everybody's piling on it all the time, all at once. Significant tick there, apparently. Bid at 23. Oh yeah, 1056. They're not quite able to break out the top there, but it does look like they want to move up. I mean, well, that was a big big amount of trade there in the 10-year, actually. I think that the flows are supportive of an up move here. I don't know if I have enough reason to expect that the flows will continue here. In fact, if anything, I'm kind of skeptical that, like, you get a little bit of a pop and then it'll come back into the range or something like that. So the heck, this song is a little bit dreary, man. I mean, I wanted a little bit of attitude, but this is maybe a little bit much. Rishi Sunak to target woke policing, end arrests over social media posts. Love it. Love it. Look, they come right back down. This is terrible action. Yeah. I'm a cop in the UK, and there's a social media element to a lot of jobs. Some of it's completely valid complaint. Then there's morons reporting threats of violence, and when we look at what's been said, it's someone disagreeing with their opinions. I think a big problem with our society is people can't cope with people disagreeing with them. Yeah, Reddit is the worst perpetrator of that final sentence. It really is. Reddit is really where it like got bad, where it's like, if you're not in line with the majority opinion, you just become silenced, completely silenced. Plato would say Reddit is democracy in action. It's a problem with democracy, right? The problem isn't that the majority always wins. The problem is that the minority loses completely, right? Like on Reddit, the minority might as well not even be there. And whenever a group of people, are able to get in a subreddit and create something that's like the minority, right? Then Reddit comes along and gets rid of it. It's like another site is like astroturfing. So like if you make a conservative subreddit, there will be people will come in and will like post under new aliases and pretend to be conservatives when they're not, and say like destructive things to harm the subreddit. That totally happens. We've even have some evidence that says that governments engage in this kind of stuff. No kidding. It's just like, oh, it's so frustrating because I think the thing that I see that bothers me the most about social media in 2022 is that you can't really have small, tight-knit communities anymore. I feel like that we have that here with the stream, but it's really hard to have that anywhere else. I suppose we could make our own subreddit. I don't know if there's really any point in having our own subreddit when we have the Discord, though. Maybe I'm wrong, but subreddits just feels like another extra thing. That's one of the other frustrating things about social media is that there's so many choices and they make you feel like that you have to be involved in every single one of them. Like my wife was saying, oh, well, if you posted Facebook reels, those could do really well. And I went and I read it and I was like, well, because she said she saw videos from people that said they were making millions of dollars from it. So it's like, well, you have to have over 10,000 subscribers before they even pay you. So yeah, that was Plato's idea. Democracy would force some minority voices, if they go against the popular narrative, to disappear, even if they go and find their own safe corner. Yeah. But like, that's the thing, is that there are certain... So I think that the market is actually, in some respects, a good counter. Because a lot of people think that the market is like a democracy. Right? That if everybody thinks that it's going to go up, then it goes up, sort of a thing. But there's kind of a catch to it, right? Because you have to be effective, right? And when everybody gets in on one idea, inevitably that's wrong. Inevitably that comes crashing apart, and the people that were the contrary voices against that end up making the big bucks, right? There's certain things that people want to believe or are susceptible to being influenced by that end up being bad for governance, bad for markets, bad for everything, right? This is how I think that the market can continually be so informationally inefficient, is because everybody wants to believe that they can apply technical analysis. That's the way that their brains work. And if it was not so, if people did the logical thing, then we wouldn't be able to have markets because there wouldn't be enough noise, right? Well, so somebody with a total of 100 units thinks money will go up, but a wing guy with 2,000 units of money think it will go down. Questions. Yes, but if the Federal Reserve then comes and lowers interest rates, then it's going to go up, and that guy with the 2,000 units of money is going to get screwed, right? Like there's certain point at which the reckoning can still happen, right? So it's not a pure democracy. But you're right, though, the big guy usually wins. This looks good here in the treasuries, but like when I look at where it is on the DOM, I'm like, oh, this looks good. I think that they could see some further extension higher. But then I look at the chart, I'm like, nah, this is basically where it's been for the last 3 hours. Really has been 3 hours, 2.5 hours today, going basically nowhere. It's so jarring, I think, when the volatility contracts that quickly, right? Like volatility last Thursday and Friday was crazy. And then you come in here and we hardly get 8 to 10 ticks. Like what? What are the polls suggesting for the midterms? That the Democrats are about to get demolished. I don't think that the midterms are going to be quite as bad for the Democrats as some current polling might suggest, but it doesn't look good for them. No, sir. That's next Tuesday, by the way. I was just verifying. I'm like, it is next Tuesday, right? Yes. No, it's November 8th is election day. I guess I should pull my ballot out and start doing my research. You know what's happening is the heater is on because it's gotten cold outside, and I need to keep this room cool, so I need to close the vent there after the stream. Larry H. Summers on Bloomberg TV. I do not think that the dovish pivot in some of the rhetoric coming out of the Fed has been warranted by the economic statistics. Larry H. Summers says ahead of Wednesday's FOMC decision, I hope the Fed will be clear that it is staying the course. No, see, the thing that Larry does not see is the chaos that's happening in individual issues. I think that the Fed pivot here is really like we need to stem the bleeding in certain securities without easing financial conditions, right? That's really what this is about. Stock performance was above average. You know what? Any kind of study about that sort of thing, I would just ignore, because you're not getting enough statistical data to really make a real analysis of it, right? You don't have enough data points. The parties change over time. Individual policies from individual presidents matters a lot more than like the overall ideological makeup, right? And then there's a lot of things that happen to the economy that have nothing to do with who's president. But everybody's looking for what would be the most pure proof that Democrats or Republicans are better on the economy. Well, the answer is that's the wrong way to think about it. What you should think about is individual policies. You know, what has been interesting this week is the Twitter thing. Like, there's been a lot of news stories about Twitter and Elon taking over Twitter, but like nothing big. I don't know. I guess I was waiting for fireworks, you know, like if the Donald Trump comes back and all these crazy things and they change the service in significant ways. Nah, it's just Twitter, but it's owned by Elon now. I'm sure that we'll look back on this day and be like, oh, we had no clue how much things were going to change. But for now, I'm kind of like, I'm reading a whole lot of noise about nothing. Well, it might be a lot like that in a lot of news until after the Federal Reserve meeting. And then you even kind of get that sort of thing where it's like, well, there wasn't anything too surprising in the Federal Reserve meeting, so. And then the next week, then things get moving again, and we're like, oh my gosh. That CPI next week is going to be a big deal, right? All right, well, anyways, I heard my bell, so I think it's time for me to get going. So we will give it a title that will ensure that nobody ever watches this day again. Volatility contracts. FOMC week. You start. We discuss how. Okay, fine. Your title is way better. We discuss how Halloween. Oh, there's two L's in Halloween. Halloween bad. It's a globalist holiday, and they're doing it, you know, to warp and twist your brains so that they can take advantage of you in their sick and disgusting practices. We'll call it. No, that's why Halloween's bad. Really what it comes down to is I'm a person that likes my routine, not because that's like my prone way of, you know, like what I'm prone to doing, but because that's just the only way that I can be effective. And I hate just about anything that comes in and disrupts that routine for no real benefit to me. And that's what Halloween is. It's like, come in and disrupt your routine just so that you can stay up late one night and eat candy. Ugh. No thanks. Pumpkins are a globalist conspiracy. Oh man. Okay, that's the title. See you guys tomorrow. Stay excellent, team.